To me, compatibilism just means the idea that a deterministic universe does not rule out the possibility or the existence of free will. Is that fair? And I think,
Um,
like for instance, for free will to be ruled out by determinism, it has to be possible in some possible worlds, right? It can't just be totally incoherent. And I think to start off, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about what sort of possible worlds do preclude the existence of free will and which ones I think are compatible with it. So, for instance, I think we can agree that a totally non causal universe, like a universe with no cause and effect, would actually would not be able to support the existence of either agents or free will, because you can't have agency without some kind of like causal connection between the past and future, because there would be no possibility of actions in that case. And I also think the main or the most popular or the most common worldview that actually precludes free will is what I call fatalism, which I think can be distinguished between determinism, because fatalism is a worldview like it was pretty common for the ancient Greeks, like the way they saw their prophecies as being sort of inevitable regardless of how you feel about it. Like the example or the most famous one is probably like Oedipus. He was given a prophecy as a young man that he was going to inevitably murder his father and marry his mother. And regardless of how he feels about it, like he can, I guess he could have gone along with it, and he can also try to avert it. But either way, the way the fates have sort of made the world, he inevitably finds himself in that situation no matter what. And I think that can be distinguished between the sort of scientific idea of determinism, because under fatalism, we have the possibility of knowledge of the future without passing through the present. So, in my view, free will requires us to, like, it requires us, like, our actual state of being, our dispositions, our attitudes, our beliefs, to be the determinant of our actions. And if our actions were going to be controlled by some kind of gods or fates without consulting us, then that actually would preclude free will. And just in general, I think we can also exclude free will from any universe where other agents, or I guess possibly non-agents, where some other entity were directly controlling human actions. That's also, at least in that situation, humans wouldn't have free will. So what I think is necessary for free will, to me at least, is just that there have to exist agents. Those agents have to be able to make choices, form intentions freely, based on their dispositions, based on their knowledge, based on beliefs, things like that, will, desires, without some other agent being able to override it, without some sort of overriding, without any causality from the past, somehow controlling the future without moving through the present. To me, that is basically sufficient conditions for free will to exist. So, what do you think?
is that the end of your opening
Yeah,
statement?
that's it. That's it.
I agree with quite a bit, and then I'll point out where we disagree. But I do want to just clarify a few things. I don't think we necessarily disagree, but there might be at the edges of some of these things. So you said that compatibilism is just a deterministic universe does not rule out free will, which I can agree with. I like to phrase it as compatibilism is the thesis that determinism and free action are compatible. So in order for me to show that your proposition, compatibilism, is true, I need to demonstrate that either determinism is not true, or free action is not true, or they're not compatible.
So the only
So first,
reason, sorry. The
I
only
want to,
reason
I
why
want
I
to
wanted,
go.
oh,
Let me finish my opening statements, then we can do that. So first, I want to go into what is determinism, because you mentioned determinism, but it wasn't clarified. Determinism is the thesis that any instance in the universe is the thesis that at any instance in the universe, exactly one future is possible, which we can simply say the future is not open. Now, the compatibilist might say, well, the physical world is causally determined our actions are determined by psychological states, which is something that Spaz said in his opening statements, to which I say fair enough. So the relevant question for the debate is if our actions and psychological states are causally determined, or if our actions are up to us. Spaz is saying they are up to us. I agree they are up to us. Now, I have two very important arguments. One is the argument that there's no compatibility between determinism and free action, and the other that determinism is false if we have something like an agent, which also sounds like incompatibility, but the whole point there is the argument has a function of demonstrating that the future is open, it's not closed. So the first argument is the argument of consequence by Peter von Ingen, which says, 1, no one has power over the facts of the past and the laws of nature. 2, no one has power over the fact that the facts of the past and the laws of nature entail every fact of the future. Therefore, no one has power over the facts of the future. Number 3 is incompatible with free action, which would be having power over the facts of the future. So that's an argument for it not being compatible. To say, in other words, if determinism is true, then our acts are the consequence of laws of nature and events in the remote past, but it's not up to us what went on before we were born, and neither is it up to us what the laws of nature are. Therefore, the consequences of these things, including our present acts, are not up to us. So that's the argument against compatibility. Now the argument against determinism. If universal determinism is true, then the future is not open. 2, if there are self-moving animals, that which we would call an agent, the future is open. 3, there are agents in the universe. Therefore, universal determinism is not true. So if we grant something like an agent, that means the future is necessarily open, which means determinism is not true. So those two arguments are, I think, very crucial for the compatibilist to address, and I do not think it's possible. So in my view, the universe is indeterminate. Determinism and free action are incompatible, and I affirm that we do have free action.
Okay, so I'm going to address those in reverse order. So for the second one, I honestly don't understand how it would follow at all, because it seems to operate on some kind of like reverse epistemology. Like if that understanding is
No, it's not
correct,
epistemology, it's metaphysics.
well, it's reverse. You're going in the wrong direction, because the way this operates, the only way for us to know that any agent exists is to know that determinism is false, right?
No. It's not. So the argument is saying that if there is an agent, that means that the future is open.
Okay, so how do we know there's an agent?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're saying. You were saying that it doesn't follow from that argument, but it does follow from the argument. Now you're just attacking the premises.
Yes, I'm
So,
attacking the
do
premise.
you want to attack the premises, or do you want to talk about how it doesn't follow from the argument?
So let me try to clarify this. So if we have a definition of, which I could dispute that implication of openness, because I think you could say openness is just a subjective state of uncertainty about the future, right?
No,
But if we want to
openness
say,
means, so I'll explain openness really quickly. Openness is like, let's imagine that in 1912 that there is a God. Let's just imagine it for a second. And God came in and reset something in the universe, like changed the laws or something like that. And after those laws, we have all the history from 1912 until the present. Now, let's say that God goes back to that same time period and he starts time again. Time would end up unfolding in exactly the same way. That's what it means for the future to not be open. If the future were open, we go back to 1912, things would unfold differently than they unfolded the way it was. That's all it means for the future to be open.
so I'm going to go to like a metaphor here. So there's a really common sort of historical example where when Socrates is about to drink his hemlock, there's a
Mhm.
student, I think, who says, well, how do we know, given this extreme wisdom, this extreme goodness of Socrates, are we sure that he's even going to be able to be killed by this hemlock? And then the person sitting next to him says, well, we can know that because we know that Socrates is a human. And by definition, humans are mortal. Like humans can be killed. So we just have to know Socrates is a human to know that he could be killed. But this kind of argument from definition creates a problem because if we use logic like this, we're technically never going to be able to be certain somebody is a human until we've observed that they're mortal, right? So I think your argument is going to have the same problem because if we're going to say that agents, for an agent to exist, requires openness of the universe, we're not going to be able to ever know that there are agents unless we know that the universe is open. And so the
No,
argument just begs the question.
no. The idea here is that you already defined what an agent is, which I agree with. That's something, a self-moving animal, a self-moving entity. You said in your opening statements that they don't move because of some external object pushing or pulling them to do so. They move of their own accord. We agree on the definition of what an agent is. What's relevant here is that if an agent can move of its own accord and can decide things in the external world, then the future is open because the agent is making it open. There are two choices before the agent, A or B, and it can choose otherwise, which means that there are two possible future states. So the future is open by the necessity of an agent being possible.
Okay, and so how do we know that there are agents?
I don't know why you're questioning how we know because you've already affirmed it to be the case that there are agents. Unless
No,
you're
no.
going to
I
go
mean,
back on your
if your
idea
definition
here.
of agent, if your definition of agent requires an open future, then we're going to have to
No,
go back.
that's not my definition requiring it. I'm saying that because because an agent has the power to settle something that is up to them, it creates an open future. Your definition of an agent entails an open future. It is not the fact that there is an open future that entails the agent.
So hypothetically, if I have like three plastic blocks, if I have like a green block, a yellow block, and a red block, and I set the red block down, and then I set the yellow block down, and then I set the green block down, is it fair to say that the yellow block is holding up the green block?
I don't understand the relevance.
Like, is
What
it,
are you?
if we have a causal chain and we say there's a state of affairs at time zero, and that deterministically leads to a state of affairs at time one, and then time one deterministically leads to a state of affairs at time two, is it fair to say that time one determines time two?
Yes, but that's not addressing the relevant question of free action here, because you already said earlier on in your opening statement that we can distinguish between causal determination in the external world and then our will and action being determined by our psychological states. So the relevant question about free action isn't going to be answered if I address the blocks there, because I can just say, according to what you already said earlier, yes, that would be causally determined in the physical state of affairs. But the relevant question is the psychological state and if it is up to us or not. You have already affirmed in this debate that it is up to us. Our psychological states can inform our choice, but the choice is up to us, meaning option A or B is free. If option A and B are free, that means that there are two possible future states. Because there are two possible future states, that means the future is open.
Okay, so when I say, can you, okay, so can really quick, can you explain what is the distinction between the set of our dispositions, desires, beliefs, so on, and us? Like, what would distinguish those two things?
I don't know what you are trying to get at there.
Okay, so
I think
would
when
you
I
agree?
say, I think when I am talking about up to us, I'm talking about this notion of um, the action being a choice. that I settle in the moment. Like, I don't have a choice in being hungry, but I do have a choice in how I settle that hunger. So whenever I talk about my dispositions, in one sense, my dispositions are me. They inform my identity, they inform my actions. So I wouldn't say that there's this distinction in a metaphysical sense between my dispositions and between my choices, or like my being, say. But I would say that there are different psychological states where I have different capabilities. So, for example, the choice is a power for me to settle things between options. And there might be sub intentional states that I could be aware of or not aware of that might be running my body. So, the point here is that if our psychological states are physically determined, the question is, are our top-down processing psychological states, our executive functioning states, are those free, or are those also psychologically determined? You've already affirmed that those are free.
So when you
Which
say when you're talking about we have dispositions and then we have a free choice, is there any distinguishment between the free choice and a random chance?
I don't know what you mean by a random
Like
chance here.
if I had a robot that was just made entirely, let's say I have a robot that can perfectly simulate the dispositions that a human would have, and then I hook up just like a random number generator, like a quantum random number generator, absolute randomness. Does that
Mhm.
random number generator give the robot free will?
Well, I don't think the robot has subjective experience, so I wouldn't call it an agent.
I mean, let's say that I have like an organic, or let's say I have an animal, and I
Mhm.
like genetically modify it to have like the intellectual capabilities of a human, like intellectual capabilities on our level. And then after that, I hook up a random number generator, or I replace. Is there some faculty of the human brain that I can just replace with a random number generator and have the same situation of free will?
I'm not sure what you're talking about the faculty there. Are you talking
Like
about the structure? Like, is there a structure in the brain we could replace that would replace free will?
what I'm trying to ask is whether free will, in your view, is just randomness.
Uh, I don't know. I don't think it's random. I'm choosing it. I'm not flipping a coin.
So, like, if I sum up, if I could somehow like quantify your dispositions,
Mhm.
and we can somehow narrow it down to like, oh, well, here's two choices. Acro might choose this, or Acro might choose that. Is there any, is there anything about free will that distinguishes it from just like flipping a coin or a random number generator?
Yeah, that there's a possibility either way. That there's an option A or an option B, and the choice of that possibility is open.
So the possibility being open, like, is that what I'm trying to figure out? How is that different than just a random number generator?
The random number generator isn't making a choice there.
So what is a choice?
A choice is where you have two options in front of you and you pick one.
Okay, but it can't be free if it's based purely on disposition, right? Like there has to be
Yeah.
something other than disposition. And so what I'm asking is that thing other, like, is free will just dispositional choices plus random chance? Is that what it is?
No, no. So free action here is you making the choice. You can be informed by certain things. There can be limits around it, but free action means that you are able to choose between two options and the choice is up to you. It's not because of some causal chain that is physiological. Because if that is the case, that's not free action.
Okay, so you have to be able to draw a distinction between something that's just purely a result of like biological disposition and then something
Mhm.
being,
Yeah,
as you say,
behavior
up to you. It has to be, there has to be some up to you that's different
in
than
some
just purely
sense.
your dispositions. And what I'm trying
That's
to
right.
figure out, if I take, like, let's say I'm ambivalent between A and B. What is the difference
Mhm.
between a random number generator and my free choice in that situation? And is there any way to identify it subjectively?
I'm not sure what you mean about the subjectively, but the difference between like a random number generator and what you're doing is there might be reasons or beliefs that you would be
Okay,
making
no,
a
so
choice in
I'm
accord
baking
with.
the reasons. I'm trying to bake the reasons into the scenario. I'm saying we have reasons that lead us to
Yeah.
being ambivalent between two choices. So if I say
Yeah,
what's the difference
that's the
between
difference.
so if I say what's the difference between choice and a random number generator, I'm talking about a random number generator deciding between two options, right?
The random number generator didn't decide anything. The thing that's governing that is a set of laws or rules. The
So
algorithm there is functioning by the governance of these laws and rules. There's nothing as part of the algorithm deciding that. The designer created the rules and everything like that, and it's just following those. In the same way that that the planets orbiting the sun is according with some type of rule. But when it comes to like our beliefs and things like that, it's not in accordance with any rules or something like that designed by some external source. We're able to change our beliefs. We're able to reflect on them. We're able to design our own rules and normative statements. We can reprogram ourselves. That's not something a number generator can do.
okay, so let me try to phrase this a different way. Like let's say we have some hypothetical possible world where a human-like entity exists and it makes decisions purely dispositionally, like it just has biological impulses, dispositions, intellect, stuff like that, and it makes choices. And let's say we have another possible world where we have a human as you think a human is, like it has free will. And let's say that just by magic somehow I can go into this human in world number one's brain and I can insert the only non-deterministic part of that entire universe is just a random number generator that when the human is sufficiently ambivalent between two situations, it just randomly chooses either option A or option B. Is there any way to distinguish these two? No, actually, okay. Let me just cut that. Like, this is going way off topic. So, what I'm trying to say is, in response to your argument about the existence of agents necessitating an open universe, if
Future,
that, if
open
you, yeah,
future.
okay, if you think an open future, okay. Well, actually, let me take this angle. So, if I look into the past, can there be agents in the past?
Yes.
So obviously, like agents in the past have the same subjective experience as agents now. Like they both have some subjective experience. They both
They're
experience
they're
openness.
they're the same. They're the same in the sense that they had a subjective experience, and they're the same in the sense that they had choice. But their experiences themselves are not identical.
Okay. But so would you agree? What I'm trying to get at is that there's not going to be any subjective way to identify the difference between an open universe or an open future and a closed future. So even if you want to say, which I don't think this is true, but if you want to say that I somehow implicitly conceded that there's an open future, well,
No,
if
I'm not
that's
saying
if
you
that's the case, I
conceded.
wouldn't even have any way of conceding that because I would have no possible way of knowing that there are any
I,
agents under your view of what an
I,
agent is.
but you're talking about epistemic certainty here, but we're
I'm
using
talking about
induction.
any I'm talking about any possible knowledge at all.
That's not so. The question of free will is not an epistemic question, it's a metaphysical question. When we talk about our certainty on the topic, that would be a different thing, and we can go into the philosophy of mind or something like that. But that's not the topic of the debate. The
So
topic
I'm
of the
not
debate is compatibilism is true. And so what's relevant here is the notion for determinism, is the future open or not? Determinism says the future is not open. Indeterminism is the negation of that proposition, which is to say the future is open. So an agent that is able to choose, meaning it is not choosing because of physical causal determination, but is choosing based on accord. That agent that is self-moving creates the fact of it being an open future. If it has the power, the future is open, meaning that determinism and free action are not compatible.
Okay, so if you're not going to agree that it's begging the question, I'm just going to have to ask again. What reason do you have to think that there are agents? Like, what reason do you think to have our experience of an open future represents an open future in truth, or just it representing our ignorance about the future? Is there any reason to believe that?
Well, hold on a second, because you also are begging the question when you say there are agents. It's not, there's nothing wrong with making presuppositions for this debate. So I'm not sure why that's a criticism of anything. When we talk about agents, I also don't understand why there's disagreement here, because your view of an agent is my view of an agent. All I'm saying is, if that type of agency exists, that entails an open future. Now you're asking, how do we know those agents exist? Which to me seems to undermine your own point.
Okay, so one point I have to make is that the way I see definitions of terms like agent, they're going to be primarily defined extensionally, or they're going to be defined in terms of like reference to some concepts that we're familiar with. So when I say what's an agent, I'm thinking, well, an agent is something like me. An agent is a human, or like a being that makes rational choices.
A
So the way I see it,
self-moving, a
the way I see
self-moving
it,
entity.
if we have two possible worlds, one is deterministic, one is not, unless I can like in the possible world where determinism is true, an agent is still going to be a human. In a possible world where determinism is false, an agent is still going to be a human in that possible world. Because when
No,
we talk about agents, we're just referring to like things like you and me. Like that's fundamentally what it is.
that's not what an agent, no, that's not what an agent is. An agent is something that can act. When we talk about an agent in the philosophical sense, it's not just a subject. It's not someone with an experience. It's that which can act. So, like something that is just a biological machine, something that just suffers from behavioralism, is not an agent. So, if we're presupposing agency, the ability to choose, and you're going to say, no, that's not what an agent is, I mean something else, okay, fine. But that's not how agent is applied in the philosophical sense.
Okay, so I'll concede the definition of agent to you then. And I'm still going to
Okay.
have the same question. How do you know there are agents?
Well, I'm an agent
How do you know you're an agent?
because I can choose.
How do you know you can choose?
I do it all the time.
How do you know you
I
do it?
don't know why you're going down this infinite regress of
No,
how do
no,
you know,
it's
how do you
well,
know?
the
Because
reason why it's infinite.
it's also undermining your own point here. Because you said at the beginning, compatibilism is that agents can act in a deterministic world. Those things are not incompatible. You already presupposed agency for this proposition. And now you're saying, how do you know? But if we just go down the skeptical route, your position also entails skepticism then. We have to presuppose some things in order for this debate to progress. Otherwise, we're going to derail into this global skepticism debate, which is not what the proposition is about.
So the only reason why it's an infinite regress is just because there's not an answer. Like just by definition, there is no way of distinguishing subjective uncertainty from an open future. Like we can have a closed future, which like for instance, by definition, the future or the present from the perspective of the past is always going to be a closed future. Like people in the past, even if they could have, they can't have had different actions, but we still say they can make choices.
That's not a closed future. It's just a closed past.
Wait, no,
So
no.
because we look back in the past and we see that things went in this specific way, and we can point to causation causing those specific things, that's just a description of how things went. But that does not then get us to the position that that is how things would go a second time around. And that does not then entail that's how the future will go. The question of is the future open or not is not decided by looking back and seeing a causal chain.
Okay, so I feel like we might not get anywhere with this. The only point I want to make is with the way you define a choice, there are going to be things that are choices and aren't choices, and they're going to be completely subjectively indistinguishable. And so there's no possibility
No,
in this view.
no, they're going to be subjectively indistinguishable because choice is a subjective experience, but they might not be objectively distinguishable.
Okay, so you want to say they're subjectively distinguishable. I just want to know, what is the subjective experience that lets us know choice exists? Like,
I'm
what can I
not sure what you
experience?
mean by I don't know what you mean by lets us know choice exists.
So, what subjective experience can a being that can make choices have that a being that can't make choices can't have?
I still don't understand the question. So what I take choice like people use choice all the time. Choice is something that we describe. Our systems of law are built on the notion of choices. So the phenomena of choice is not deniable. But what is the question is if that choice is an illusion or if it actually is a capability. That's the
Yeah.
relevant question.
Okay. Yes,
Right.
exactly. That's the relevant question.
Right. So I don't know. So I'm not sure why you keep talking about like how do we know choice exists? What we need to be asking is how do we know we actually have the choice or not? This is a really difficult question in philosophy, and it's not settled. This has been contentious for a long time.
Okay, but
So
so
on my
if it's
view,
not
on
if
yeah,
it's not
on my view, I it there is a supposition that's made. On any view, there's a supposition made.
okay, well, so given that I don't agree with the supposition, you're not going to be able to use it as the main premise of an argument. That's all I'm going to say.
But then it disagrees with your whole proposition because
Oh,
in order to say compatibilism is true, you have to presuppose agency.
so the entire point of compatibilism, at least the way I'm understanding it, is that you can make choices without an open universe or without an open future.
Then it's not
Because
a choice.
on
It's
this
not a
view,
choice.
a choice would just be an intention that we form based on, well, based on our disposition.
That's not compatibilism because in compatibilism the choice is separate from the deterministic universe where you're able to settle things. So if you're going to say that everything is settled in some type of determinist chain, you're just a determinist, you're not a compatibilist. And if you're going to say that all choices are just behaviors, you're just a determinist, you're not a compatibilist. A compatibilist is going to say you do have choices. You can choose A or B, but the world is determined.
Well, I mean, your understanding of compatibilism would just be obviously incoherent.
It's the view of Van Ingen. It's also the view of Helen Stewart. I'm not sure why you're saying it's incoherent. It's a standard view of what compatibilism is in philosophy. I think it's incoherent in general. I think compatibilism is not true. That's why I'm an incompatibilist.
Well, no, I mean, like, for the argument you just made, it's a priori incoherent to talk about because you would have to be talking about a world that's simultaneously determined and not determined. So
No, the
nobody, like,
world. No, no, no. The physical world can be determined, but the point of the compatibilist is to say the physical world is determined. There are determining facts about your physical state and your psychological state. But when you make the choice, when you control things in your life, you do control things in your life. You're not just the slave to your dispositions.
so if we want to talk about a deterministic universe, I was always under the impression the entire point of a deterministic universe is that, well, is it like you said, we can go back in time, restart the process, and then we're going to get the same result? Like, that's what a deterministic universe is. And if you want to
Right.
say we live in a deterministic universe, but then there's also an extra element of free will, there's no reason to exclude these choices or these like free will entities from being part of the universe.
There
So
is a reason to exclude
the
it.
only
There
thing
is a
they
there,
represent is just these random number generators.
I'm not sure why you keep appealing to the random number generators.
I'm
The point here is that if if the universe is deterministic, not deterministic, but universally determined, it is incompatible with the notion of free will. Because in order for free will to exist, it means that you have two options, which means there are two possible states in the future. If there are not two possible states in the future, there's only one possible state in the future, there is no ability to control that fork that occurs, which means it's incompatible. And if you're going to say, no, it's compatible, then that means that there are two possible options in the future, which means that things would play out differently if we replayed the tape. Because agents could possibly decide in a different way over and over and over again. We'd have a totally different state of affairs.
Sure. So we would have, well, I mean, we would have a totally different state of affairs on that view. We would have a completely different state of affairs only in things that that result somehow from the actions of agents, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess we can work with that. But if you want to say determinism specifically is, mm,
The future is not open, is the
so,
thesis of determinism.
and you're saying specifically the definition of an agent requires for the future to be open. So determinism is, or so compatibilism is just a definition.
I'm not saying it requires. I'm not saying it requires it. I'm saying it entails it.
Right. Okay. So I think we just have a misunderstanding about that, and I'm going to have to. Well, at least I can still address the first argument you gave, which I think
the consequence argument. I can go
Yeah.
through it again if you like.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't mind that.
Okay. This is the second argument, which shows that free will is not compatible with determinism. 1, no one has power over the facts of the past and the laws of nature. 2, no one has power over the fact that the facts of the past and the laws of nature entail every fact of the future, which is just to say determinism is true. 3, therefore, no one has power over the facts of the future.
So, if I'm going to try to rebut that, I'm just going to have to say the only way it can be the case that there's a necessary entailment between the facts of the past and the facts of the future is for us to be talking about the present, right?
I don't understand.
Like, okay, so the connection between the past and the future necessarily passes through the present, right? And what I'm trying to say,
I guess you could say that. I'm not sure. I think like if you're taking an A theory of time, then yes.
yes, it's going to pass through the future. And so one of the interesting consequences of a deterministic physics is that time is technically going to be reversible. So for every law of physics that applies forward in time, it can also apply backwards in time. And so it's actually coherent to talk about assuming determinism. It's totally coherent if I say, for instance, well, the only possibility of, or the only way that the state at time t equals 0 is possible is if I make a particular choice at time t equals 1, right? And the only, like, if I want to understand what it means to have power over something, the whole point of having power over something is that it changes depending on your choice. And so in the case of a deterministic universe, if we want to postulate a different choice, then by definition, we're also postulating a different past. So whenever we
wait, how are we postulating a different past?
Assuming that, well, I mean, so if we assume,
you mean from our perspective today, perspective today, we would be postulating an alternative past where you chose differently.
If my choices are necessarily leading to a particular future, and my choices necessarily came from a particular past, The only way I can postulate a different choice for myself is to implicitly postulate a different past, right?
Well, it's explicit.
Well, I mean, I guess it's implicit because I'm not saying it out loud, but yeah, yeah. So you're explicitly postulating a different past anytime we postulate any change in choice. So
Yeah.
for us not to have the only sense in which we don't have power over the past is the extent to which we can't postulate different choices. And if we can't postulate different
No,
choices,
no,
we
that's not
don't.
the only extent. You cannot go back and change the laws of nature. You cannot go back and stop Hitler. You cannot go back and stop Socrates from drinking the hemlock. You cannot go back and like prevent your parents from conceiving you. Those things are things you cannot do.
Right. Well, I mean, technically, we would be postulating a different past in terms of
Right.
parameters
So
that we're
that's
not
all.
aware
That's
of.
what it means to have control over. That's what it means to have power over facts of the past.
Okay, so what is control?
The ability, control, power, choice, like your ability to make something happen, to change the state of affairs.
Okay. But so technically, if determinism, as I understand it, is true, it's fair to
Mhm.
say that everything in the past or everything in the future is implicitly contained informationally in every state of the past, right? Like or the procession of the universe all the way to the end is implicitly encoded in the state of the universe as it was first created. And
Yeah, you could
so
phrase it. You could
if
phrase
we
it like that.
understand
It's
it,
just to say if determinism is true, it just means if you play the tape back twice, it happens the same way.
yeah, yeah. So if it happens the same way, there's not going to be any way of distinguishing, at least in terms of what the laws of physics look like. There's no way of distinguishing which direction is being played. Like the laws of physics are reversible. And so if we
Sure.
want to talk, if it's ever going to be coherent to talk about counterfactual actions, which we have to be able to talk about counterfactual actions to even be able to coherently define what it means to have power over something. In this view, when we postulate a counterfactual action, we're also implicitly postulating that there must have been some different, like for instance, if I have a box and I want to postulate that I can open the box and find a ball inside the box, I'm implicitly postulating that at some point in time somebody put the ball into the box.
Right.
And so for me to be able to coherently talk about the counterfactual worlds where there is and isn't a ball in the box, I have to be like implicitly postulating an entire history of the box, right?
Well, I don't know if you have to do
So
the entire history. Yeah, all we have to do is assume that an entire history led up to that box.
okay, so all I'm saying is under my understanding of determinism, if I exist at time t equals 1, and then there's also time t equals 0, and there's time t equals 2, the only sense in which it's coherent to say that I have power over time t equals 2, it's also coherent to say that I have power over time t equals 0.
At the time of t equals 0. You do not have power of time t equals 0 at time t equals 2.
At time, well, I mean, why not?
Can you change what happened to you when you were 13?
No.
That's why not.
Well, I mean, technically, there's a lot of things. Well, there are things in the past that you can't control, but obviously, there are also things in the future that you can't control. The only thing I'm trying to say here is that for the possibility of compatibilism to be true, we have to assume that it's possible for choice in a closed future to be a coherent concept. And the only way
Right.
that's
And
true
I'm demonstrating they're
is if we're thinking in terms of either subjective uncertainty or reference classes or something else. And
not. No,
just like we
no.
have,
So the point of determinism, if it's not coherent to say that if you played the tape twice, everything would happen again, and say I had the ability to choose otherwise. Those are not coherent. Those are incompatible.
and so when you say could have chosen otherwise, what does could have mean? It just means you can go back in
There are
time
two
and
possible future states, which means you play the tape back twice. The second time through, there would be a different future. There'd be a different world.
And so, if I want to postulate like an imaginary entity or like a demon that has the power to rewind time at will, would you agree that that demon can take complete control of your actions?
Yeah.
Yeah, it can.
Yeah, the demon would be controlling things.
Well,
The
wait. The
demon would be
demon
an
would be
agent.
control. The demon can control things without violating your free will.
No, if the demon's controlling it, I don't have free will.
So,
If the
the only
demon's
thing.
controlling me, there's no free will.
So the only thing the demon can do is rewind time
Oh,
and say, let's say that the demon you're choosing
so I
between
don't
A and
understand
B.
I don't understand your point with the demon here. So like, okay, let's imagine someone can rewind time, but that's all they can do. And then, but that's not the relevant question. The relevant question is, when we play the tape back twice, does it play the same movie or is it a different one? That's the relevant question.
Well, so
And if
the
it
reason
plays
it's
the same
relevant.
movie, then we had no choice all along.
Well, I mean, the reason it's relevant is because your view of free will lets a demon take complete control of your actions without violating it.
How does it do
Because
that?
let's say you're choosing between two things, the demon can just rewind time however many times it takes for you to choose whatever option it wants, right?
But so the demon keeps rewinding it. I keep choosing different things. That's fine. The power to choose is still there, but we've entered this other hellscape universe that's neither deterministic nor indeterministic. But the power to choose remains. So that's not my view of choice there isn't shattered or anything like that. It just means that choice exists, but this other aspect of the world is now fucked up.
Okay. So I honestly think we have kind of an intractable problem with just different definitions of what compatibilism is. Which I was a little bit worried that it was going to turn into this when I saw you cancel your debate with Jiva over a similar issue. But I don't think if you're not going to accept my definition of compatibilism, then we're just not going to be able to continue.
I'm saying compatibilism is incoherent. That's the
Right.
whole point here.
So you have a
So
definition of compatibilism that
I
makes it a
accept the
priori
definition.
incoherent. Wait, okay, what's your
No,
definition?
no. I'm not saying it's a priori incoherent. I'm
Okay,
saying
so
that what you postulate as you affirmed what an agent is, you affirmed what determinism is, and I'm demonstrating why those two things are incoherent. It's not a definitional difference. It's a logical entailment of your definitions.
okay, so let's go back to this. What part of your rebuttal of compatibilism isn't a priori?
I'm not sure what you mean here
Like
about a priori.
what part? So if something is a priori, that means we don't need any kind of like experience to know about it, right? I'm trying to figure out. So what about your arguments is not a priori, or especially I'm talking about the second argument. I'm talking about the fact that agents necessitate an open future. So if that's your definition of an agent, then
No,
compatibilism is
the
going to be.
definite no. We have the same definition of an agent, which is something that can choose. It's not a definitional claim to say that the future is open because of agents. It's a
Okay,
logical entailment. It's a logical entailment. Those are different things.
so
It's
what's your
not an analytic
definition?
truth. It's a
What
logical
is
entailment.
what is your definition of choose?
We already went through this. You have
No,
two
no.
options and you can pick A or B.
Okay, you can pick A and B. I would assume according to
Right.
some criteria, not according to
It
random
can be
chance.
in
Like if I
accordance.
have.
It can be in accordance with some criteria. That's fine.
So the
But in
extent
the
to which it's in
relevant sense,
accordance with criteria.
let me finish. In the relevant sense, it is up to you. It is not a causation. It is not caused by something external to you to choose that. It is up to you to choose it.
So the extent to which it's the result of a criteria is the extent to which it's not free, right?
No, it just means it's limited.
Right.
Something
Okay.
can be limited. There can be limits. Like I can't fly to the moon.
So I'm talking about limitations within the mind that makes the choice, right? Like I'm saying, if I have a choice between A and B, and A is $20 and B is $10, then I'm going to choose A based on the criteria of which is a higher amount of dollars, right? So that's what I mean when I say choice according to a criteria. Like you just have a criteria that lets you determine between multiple options, and you choose freely. By freely, I just mean you choose the option that meets the criteria. You choose the option that meets your disposition, your
When you
preferences,
say
your knowledge.
choose, when you say choose, are you saying you have a power to choose between two options, that you could choose the other option if you so pleased?
Yes, you could choose the other option
Right.
counterfactually.
No, no, no.
Counterfactually, you could
Hold
choose.
on. No, it's not an epistemic thing here. The point of it here is that there are two possible futures, and if those two possible futures have the possibility of existing, it's a metaphysical question. It's not about the epistemology here. It is either the case that you could choose otherwise, or it is not the case that you could choose otherwise. The thesis of free action is to say it is the case you can choose otherwise. Not that you can imagine choosing otherwise, but it is the case you can choose otherwise.
So, under this view, there's no possibility of knowing whether a choice occurred without a time machine.
We can verify it in an empirical sense. That's why it's a
Okay, wait.
philosophical question.
Okay, right. So there's no possibility. I'm not. It doesn't even have to be empirical. Like there's no possibility at all of ever knowing whether a choice has been made or whether an agent exists epistemically.
No, we can know that I made a choice. What we cannot verify is if I actually had the ability to choose otherwise, because to do that would be to see me choose otherwise. We don't have a time machine, so we don't have that information. That's why this question is not an empirical question, but a philosophical one, and why it is a metaphysical one.
Okay, so I mean, technically, you literally just said you can know you made a choice, but you can't know that it was a free choice, right?
In
So
the
do you
sense,
acknowledge
I know I
non-free
used
choices?
know in different senses and I delineated how we know. In the empirical sense, the veridical sense, we cannot know, but we can infer it, which is a type of knowledge.
Okay, wait, can you
There's
explain the
inferential
inference?
knowledge that we can
Okay,
know.
can you explain the inference?
The inference of what?
The inference that we make choices.
It's not an inference that we make choices. We observe ourselves making choices. We have to make inferences to know if that observation is truth-apt in the sense that we think it is.
Okay, so when I think about observing something, like if I observe a car passing, what I'm doing is
Mhm.
I'm giving myself some way of distinguishing possible worlds where a car passed and a car didn't pass. And so if you have a situation that I think you've already agreed it's completely subjectively indistinguishable, just in principle, there's no possibility of distinguishing subjectively whether a choice occurred. How can you coherently say that we observe a choice? Like we have the subjective perception of a choice, but the subjective perception of a choice is doesn't give us any information at all about the openness of the future.
You just repeated what I said. What I said was we observe something, we observe a phenomena, that being I perceive myself making a choice. The question of if I had power over that choice or not is not something we can verify through something like science. It requires something else, which is
Okay,
why it's a philosophical question. But what the whole this goes back to what we said earlier on. You've already affirmed that you have the power to choose.
yeah, so my definition of choice is I guess just incompatible with yours. What I'm saying, my
No, it's
criticism,
not. It's not even incompatible with mine, but it's not the way choice is used in the compatibilist literature.
okay, can you define choice for me?
The the power to control your environment, to make yourself move, to make some action happen. You're going to say that it's just behavior and dispositions, that it's just a chain of of causality. Psychological states are causally determined by external states, blah, 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 blah. But that is just determinism. For it to be free will, It needs to have some sense where it is not settled by a chain of causation, but it is settled by you.
So you're literally saying choice by definition is non-deterministic, or by like an obvious
No,
extension to
I'm
the
not saying
definition.
that. I'm saying in the compatibilist view, choice by definition is free from causation. In some sense, it has to be free from causation. Otherwise, it's not representing compatibilism.
No, okay, so it can be. No, I don't think it can be free from causation.
In
So,
some sense, free. In some
okay.
sense. Like, there is a chain of causation which created my body. I am an ape. The reason why my body is shaped like that is because of evolution. That would be some type of external causation. The point of this discussion is not to say, indeterminism is not to say that the world is entirely chaotic. There is still a deterministic element, but the negation of determinism is just to say that not all sectors of the universe are determined. There are some places in the universe that are indeterminate, that create an open future. One of those places we can point to is the microphysical. We can look at quantum mechanics where we see it is not deterministic in classical mechanics. So we already have some evidence that there are aspects of our universe that are not universally determined. Now, the relevant question for free will and compatibilism is if within limits or boundaries we have some free choices.
Okay, so would you agree that the state of a choice being made can be represented physically, even if it were a free choice, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we
Like
could draw a
there
picture
are
of a
ways
choice. We could make a
there are
movie out of it.
ways of physically representing choice. If
Like,
determinism,
what do you mean by physically representing it?
like a choice could be described in terms of like collections of particles.
What do you mean?
Like if I had a complete description of the particles that make up a human body, at the instant that that human makes a choice, I also would have implicitly a description of the choice, right?
Are you taking sort of the view that like if you had access to every atom in the universe and knew all the laws about how the atoms behaved and knew the time period and just had that access that you could know all the future states?
No, not the future. I'm talking about the past states. I'm talking about doing the Maxwell's demon thing in reverse. I'm saying if I can understand what a choice looks like, I can reason backwards to the necessary conditions that led to that choice, right?
You
And
can
that would
see
be
a
the
causal
case.
chain that got to a choice, right?
And even
Sure.
if the future, like let's say, even if the future is open, then it will not be like it's going to stop being open as soon as the present passes, right? So when I
No,
talk
the
about
future, the future is just a state of affairs that hasn't occurred. So the present occurs, that is no longer the future. The future is always open until there is no more future. But once it's settled, it becomes a different period in time, either present or past.
okay, so if I have a complete description of the state of affairs in like let's say 1970, and I wanted to try to calculate the state of affairs in 1971, do you think that would be
Mhm.
possible? Or do you think would there be a completely unexplainable phenomenon that occurred that wasn't even retrospectively the result of anything that happened before it?
On my view, I don't think it's possible because I'm an indeterminist. I don't think the universe is universally determined. I think that agents in that time period from 1970 would maybe change some things. So I think some things would repeat, like the motion of the planets, say, things that agents have no control over. but tiny little things that agents have control over might change. For example, one deer might die that didn't die in another context, and then that deer may have had way more kids, and then that those kids may have had way more kids, and then they would have eaten way more trees, and then other animals would have died because of that. But if you were to just look at it in a really broad way, you might not see much difference. But there would
Okay.
be differences between 1970 and 1971 on my view.
Okay. And so do you think well actually do you think that the choices or like the openness of agents can be explained in terms of openness of elementary particles?
I don't think that they explain it. No, what I think explains um, the freedom an agent has is something like supervenience, which is top-down causation from a psychological state.
Okay. And is there any way that supervenience can be distinguished? I know I've asked this like
From
6 times. I know, yeah, you already know what I'm asking, don't you?
distinguished from what?
From a random number generator.
Yes.
Yes, and how?
The random number generator is governed by algorithms. The supervenience is governed by sets of beliefs which can be changed, which can be influenced. You can choose based on your rationality. They're
So
governed by different things.
in both cases we have an algorithmic process that leads up to
No,
an open.
I'm not presupposing it's an algorithm because I don't
Oh,
think that neurological states are binary states. They're neural networks. They work in different ways.
right. Well, I mean, you can have a neural algorithm. It doesn't have to be like literally an algorithm. It's just equivalent. Like it could be described as an algorithm.
Right, but the difference here in the supervenience is that the governing power over those beliefs are not governed by simply like physical states or the computer or the hardware or the algorithms. There's no algorithm governing the belief states or the rationality.
Right. So under no view is there going to be an algorithm that governs the actual choice, right? What I'm asking is whether there's any. So wait, okay. Let me try to go step back a little bit. Do you think you could describe the human brain minus supervenience as being equivalent to like a Turing machine?
Um, I can imagine a an AI that would be sentient and perhaps not have supervenience.
Okay, so you can have a non-supervenient sort of artificial intelligence,
I can
and
imagine it. I don't know. I don't know if it's physically possible.
yeah, yeah. But let's say that the supervenience is going to take. What I'm trying to, I think it seems like what you're describing is just totally incoherent to me because you're talking about there's an algorithm, there's something that's neither algorithmic nor chance, and I'm trying to figure out how that's coherent.
Well, I don't know why it's incoherent for you not to know how something works.
No, no, yeah, I mean,
Incoherent means that they're not these things aren't working together. There's something about them that negates the other. So to say like I don't under all you mean to it seems to me like all you're saying is like I don't understand. But I don't need to show you how supervenience works. All I need to demonstrate is that the universe is not deterministic, or that determinism and free action are not compatible, or that free action doesn't exist.
okay, so surely you would concede that you haven't demonstrated and don't have any. I mean, like none of your arguments even come close to demonstrating anything about whether the universe is deterministic, right?
No, I have shown that the universe is not deterministic if there are agents. I have demonstrated that
So
determinism is
if you
is
use
incoherent.
that
I have just
definition of agent, there's
I have
no
I
possibility
have
of
I
knowing
let me
whether there's
finish.
such thing as an
Let me
agent.
finish. Let me finish. And I have demonstrated that it is incompatible.
So the only sense in which you've demonstrated the only thing that argument does is just move the epistemic question one level down. So now there's no possibility of knowing whether agents or choices exist without knowing whether the universe is deterministic.
There is the possibility of knowing it, but that is not the purview of this debate. This debate is on compatibilism is true. You have not demonstrated that it is true, and I have demonstrated how your view is incoherent.
So the reason, wait, how is my view incoherent? The only thing
They're not
wrong.
compatible. Free action, and a deterministic universe are not coherent because a deterministic universe means the future is closed. If the future is closed, no power to settle things in the world. It means we'll make the same choice over and over again. It's not a choice at all.
And so
Freedom there, as it is incompatible, which makes it incoherent.
So what I'm saying is it's just manifestly obviously coherent to talk about choices in a closed universe because that's already the situation when we talk about the past. And the only way it's even possible to make a distinction between a closed past, or like a past that was previously open and a past that was never open, is to postulate a non-existent counterfactual. And if you want to postulate a non-existent counterfactual, then you can have, like, if we're allowed to learn things based on these counterfactuals, then we like break causality.
All you've shown there is that that in order for me to imagine a different state of affairs, I have to imagine a different past. But that's not an argument for why I have to accept the future is closed. It's fine for us to have counterfactuals. It's fine for us to imagine possible worlds. But the relevant question here is it the case that you have a choice or not? And the other question is it the case that the future is closed or not? I've
So
shown that those relevant questions, if we answer them in particular ways, entail other things not being possible. All counterfactual stuff is interesting in a sense, but it doesn't get at the question.
so do you think, does your view allow for there to have been choices in the past?
If agency is right, then there were choices in the past. There was the power to choose otherwise. However, because it's a binary choices, it was settled in a particular way. So just
So,
because just because there's one chain of causation does not mean that the future will be one chain of causation. That is a posit you have to make when it comes to determinism, which is a fine posit to make. But if you make the posit that because of chains of causation in the past, we are now through inductive reasoning saying that there's chains of causations in the future and the future is closed, that notion is incompatible with an idea that you have any power to choose otherwise.
so you're not even going to be able to define power without presupposing either subjective openness or presupposing, well, indeterminism, right? Like you can't even
Right.
coherently
We have to
talk about
presuppose lots of stuff for this debate that we're not questioning. We're not questioning the presupposition that the external world exists. We're not questioning the presupposition that we have qualitative states. We're not questioning the presupposition that you have a mind and I have a mind. There are many things we're not questioning because they're not relevant to the debate topic. What is relevant to the debate topic is the future open or not? And do you have the power to choose or not? Those are the two relevant questions. A compatibilist would say the future is closed and you have the choice. That's the compatibilist view. The incompatibilist view is to say the future is open and they might not affirm, or so the next proposition, the free action doesn't have to be affirmed or negated. The incompatibilists, all they have to say is that the future is open.
Okay. So the point I'm trying to make is that if you can't even define power. Like there's no possibility of defining what it means to have power over something without presupposing the possibility of having it. Because you
You
have to
already
suppose,
presupposed it when you invoked agency.
right. And so when I invoke agency, I only mean that agents can make choices, as in they can have done different things in counterfactuals, and they can do different things in terms of the subjective uncertainty that they experience.
No, all that's saying is that I can imagine people making other choices. That is not answering the question if it is the case another choice could be made.
Yes, if it is the choice that there were other preconditions for the choice, then a different choice would have been made. That's what I mean when I say they could have done otherwise counterfactually.
No, I
Saying,
mean, that might be what you mean. That might be what you mean, but that's not the question here when we talk about choice, because that still just says there is no choice there. It was decided by these other external events. Change the external events, you'll get different choices. But the choice itself was governed by external things. That is not choice on a free will view. That's a fine way to define choice. You can. But for to be a compatibilist, you have to affirm free will or free action in some sense, which means that the power to choose is a power and a power. You can question that power all you want, but when you question that power, you question your own thesis. And if you're going to say, no, my thesis is just that what we think is a choice is a power at all, what we think is a choice is just a behavior, a phenomena we put a term to, then you're not evoking free will. You're invoking behavioralism. You're evoking biological determinism, which just means you're a determinist and
so
an
under
incompatibilist.
yeah, under your view, I would definitely just be a determinist. So
Right.
my final
It's
yeah, yeah.
also the philosophical position on compatibilism.
Yeah. So my final point, I do think there's a little bit of a problem defining things such that there's no possible way of knowing whether the definition applies to any given object. But I there's no sense in just continually going around in circles about these issues. So I'm sorry if I misled you about what my view was, then that's my bad. I'll try to be more clear about things like this in the future. I think it's time to just go ahead and conclude the debate.
Sure. Do you want to do a closing statement?
I think I've said everything I'm going to say.
Um, well, I feel a little bad doing closing statements if you don't do closing statements.
Well, I guess you can talk for a minute and I can try to work something out. Let me think about
Yeah, sure. I can go first with closing statements, and then you can just do a final response if you like. Um, so I'll just go back through um, my earlier opening statement and just reaffirm some things. One is what compatibilism is. Compatibilism is the view or the thesis that a deterministic universe is compatible with free action, which is to say, the power to choose. Now, in order to demonstrate that the proposition compatibilism is true is false, I need to show either that the universe is indeterminate, or rather, is not universally determined, which is what indeterminate means. It's the negation of universal determinism. Or I need to show that incompatibilism is true, that is, the negation of compatibilism. Or I need to show that we don't have free action. The way I addressed this was to show that determinism and free action are not compatible by using von Ingvagen's argument of consequences, which just goes, um, I'll just read it really briefly again. No one has power over the facts of the past and the laws of nature. No one has power over the fact that the facts of the past and the laws of nature entail every fact of the future, i.e., determinism is true. Three, therefore, no one has power over the facts of the future, which is to say, the future is closed. Now, the other argument I used was Hilary Stewart's argument for the falsity of universal determinism, which goes as follows. If universal determinism is true, then the future is not open. Two, if there are self moving animals, the future is open. 3, there are self-moving animals. 4, therefore, universal determinism is not true. Now, the relevance of that argument for a self-moving animal, that's what we mean when we say an agent. They have the power to choose, they have the power to move, and it is not done so by external objects, pushing or pulling the creature to do so. They settle the matter of their own accord, which means that the future has 2 possible states. If agents exist, which is presupposed by the proposition of compatibilism, then that means the future is open. If the future is open, that means that determinism is not true, which also reaffirms the notion that determinism and free action are incompatible. And that's my view on the proposition. Compatibilism is true. I think it's false. I think the universe is not universally determined. I think it's indeterminate. I think the two ideas are incompatible, and I think we do have free action.
Okay, so for my closing statement, my view on compatibilism is just the view that that a deterministic universe doesn't preclude the possibility of choice. And my only real reasoning for that is if we consider an entity that exists deterministically, it doesn't seem like at any point we can introduce random chance or we can introduce choice and thereby create free will. And it seems like we could go, I mean, we can go from a completely deterministic universe to a completely indeterministic one. And it seems like if there isn't going to be free will in the beginning, there still won't be free will at the end. Because at least to me, I can't understand any way of conceptualizing free will except as just an algorithm that can include, or not an algorithm, but some decision criteria that also makes mention of random chance. I think we have to distinguish between my view of determinism and fatalism, because one of the big distinctions that needs to be made is under determinism, the only way the future can be determined from the past is by going through the present. And so, for instance, I do have power over the future because if I were to act differently, then the future would be different. And for me, that's what it means for me to have power over something. That I have, like, I take one action. If I were to have taken a different action, then there would have been a different result. And that means to me that I would have had power. And there is a pretty strong argument that since I don't have control over the past, then I also don't have control over the future. I agree. That's fair enough. But I think if we're going to talk about counterfactuals, if we're going to talk about counterfactual other choices in the present, I do think under reversible laws of physics, we're also technically always talking about counterfactuals in the past. They're just not epistemically accessible to us. And so it doesn't, at least to me, it doesn't seem to create as big of a problem as it would seem like. But that's just my 2 cents. So thanks for the conversation, Arco.